Sapphire TextureRidges is a versatile effect that you can use to create all kinds of organic looks. Things like water, smoke, fire, even sort of sci-fi plasma style looks. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can combine some of the great new presets to create this stylized fire look. And we'll also take a look at how you can create the same thing inside of Sapphire Effect Builder and save a whole bunch of time. Let's jump in. So today I'm working in DaVinci Resolve, but you can use any of the hosts that supports Sapphire. The first thing I'm going to do here is to create a generator. So I need a solid color. And I'm going to drag that down to my timeline, right click and choose New Compound Clip, Create. All right, next, it's going to clear that and I'm going to type in Ridges. Come down to Open Effects. Now I've got a generator and a filter version. I'm just going to grab the filter version and just hit play. And you can see that's nice and fast, playing back in real time. And we've got a lot of parameters in here. It's not a huge Sapphire effect as far as Sapphire effects go. But what I want to point out is that because it's so responsive, don't get too hung up by the naming. Some of these things are really obvious, things like frequency and speed and, of course, color. But there's other things like ridge fractal octaves and octave frequency scale. I don't even pay attention to the names. All I do to dial in my looks is just drag the sliders. And because it's so responsive, it's very easy to dial in the kind of look that you're after. Okay, change the color, make that kind of blue. And I'm already starting to sort of dial in the look that I'm after. But in this case, I'm actually going to start with a preset because we're going to create some fire. So what I'll do is I'll click Load Preset, and there's a lot of great presets you can use as starting points in here, but I'm going to use Firestarter. Looks like some flames, and click Load. And I'm going to grab TextureRidges again, drop it on, and for this one, I want some smoke, so I'm going to use, where is it here? It's Hot Plumes, more of a smoky look. And at the moment, it's covering the flames, so for this one, I'll change Combine from Noise Only to Screen. Okay, so that's a good start. Let's dial this in a little bit better. I think that the smoke is probably not moving fast enough, so we need to increase the shift speed Y. Take a look at that. That's a little better. And it's a little dark and also a little detailed. So if we bring noise octaves, so we take it up, it's going to be way too detailed. But if we bring it down to, say, 1, still looks smoky, but not quite so detailed. It's a little dark, so we can adjust the scale lights just to lighten it up a little bit. It's looking pretty good. And maybe the offset darks, just bring that down a bit. Just to dial that in. It's probably still a little slow, so we can just increase the shift speed Y. And a little bit more. All right, let's jump onto the flames. Don't literally jump onto the flames. And make some adjustments. I think they're a little big. So what I'll do is I'll just take that down a little bit. What about the detail? That's not bad. I think we can just change the octave slightly, add a little bit more detail to it. So what was it on? It was on 4. If we go 5, how does that look? Ah, looking good. I'm liking that. I think the color's pretty good. We could just play around with that a little bit. Make it a little brighter. Just in the contrast. All right, so that's a good start. Why don't we try and add some embers now? So I'll just do a quick save. And we'll drag TextureRidges on again and load preset. For this one, we're going to use this Distant Galaxies as a starting point, okay? And click load. And once again, change from noise only to screen. That's sitting over the top. Now this needs some serious adjustment. So I think here, let's see, these are fairly high octave frequency scale and gain. So I'm going to bring these down. And we kind of want to sort of zero in on these sort of blobs. Let's just adjust the gain as well. There we go. Now they're stationary at the moment, so shift speed Y will be good here. So a little slow, we need to bring that right up. These are going to be moving fairly fast. I guess probably let's just double that to 4. All right. Now they're a little big and also they're a little sort of blobby, right? We need to make them a little sort of more, little longer, make them vertical to give them kind of a motion blur kind of look. So frequency X, we can bring that up and that kind of stretches them out. And also frequency Y, and they're probably a little big. We can take frequency up, then we can dial in the offset, darks and scale lights. We get something like this. And maybe even just increase the boil speed. So boil is kind of like evolution. If you've used fractal noise before, it's kind of like the evolution setting. So something like that, okay? And maybe just a little faster on the Y. Now, the reason I'm not spending too much time on this is because in a moment we're going to go into Sapphire Effect Builder and we're going to replace this with Sapphire Dust, which I think does the job a little better. It's a little more ember-like, if you like. It has a turbulence setting, which makes it look a lot more realistic. But that's a good start. All right, so we're going to go into the builder in a moment, but first of all, I'm going to save these as presets so we can load them inside Sapphire Effect Builder. So this one is embers. What we'll do is we'll turn it off, and we'll come back to this one first. And we'll click Save Preset. We'll call this one Flames 1. I'm not going to put any of the details in here, but if you wanted to save this as an individual preset for later use, I suggest putting a description and the other details in there. I'm going to save that. I'm going to turn that off. Turn on the next one. Save preset. I'll call this Smoke 1. Save. Turn that off. And the last one is the embers. Embers 1. And save. Okay, so now we can load these up inside of Sapphire Effect Builder, and we can start customizing this even further by adding other Sapphire effects. So what I'll do is actually delete these now. Because we have the presets, we can always load them again. And this time I'll search for Effect and grab Sapphire Effect, drop that on the layer. And if you've never used Sapphire Effect before, you can see here there's not much going on in here. It's actually an empty effect. There's nothing in the effect until you actually start adding individual Sapphire effects and combining them inside the effect builder. And then you'll see those parameters inside of the host. So the first thing we'll do here is click on Load Preset to open up the preset browser. And I'm going to search for Flames 1. There we go. There's our preset, and click Load. All right, so there's the parameters that I just mentioned. Now that we have an effect loaded in there, we'll see those in the host. I'm not going to touch those in here. What I'm going to do is click on Edit Flames 1 to open up the effect builder. All right, so that's exactly the same look as we just created. And you can see it's dropped it inside. I'm just going to disconnect the mask here. It's dropped it inside the effect builder. And you can see it is a node here. And when I select that, I can see all of the parameters on the right-hand side. So let's just add the other ones. And we can do that a couple of ways. Probably the fastest way to do this would be just to duplicate the node. Just connect it again just by dragging it into the hierarchy there and clicking on Load Preset for the next one. So our presets should be in here. So there's embers 1 and there's smoke 1. Okay, so I'll just load smoke. It has the same settings. The screen was already set in combine, so it's sitting over the top. And we'll duplicate again. And I haven't done this yet. This is the first time to do this today. And we'll load preset and we'll put in the embers like that. So if I just preview that now, you can see how fast it is, even inside the builder here. If we didn't want to make any adjustments to this, if we were just perfectly happy with how this looked, all I would do is select each one, turn off all of the parameters. These are the host parameters, and just choose the parameters I wanted to appear in the host. Things like color, just the most useful ones, things like seed. Select the next one, and what's that? That's the smoke, right? So again, color, seed. You can always come back into the effect builder and make adjustments, but this just makes it much easier to work with inside the host because we're only seeing a few of the most important parameters. And this one, again, probably color and seed and maybe frequency for that. And once I had that all set up, I come up and I choose Save S Effect and save that as a preset. So now I've got my 3 individual TextureRidges presets and a single preset for Sapphire Effect with all of those inside it. But I'm just going to cancel that and I'm going to make a few adjustments. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect the embers. And remember I mentioned I wanted to use Dust for this. So what I'll do is I'll hit the Tab key, type in Dust and add Sapphire Dust. Because of course we're in Sapphire Effect Builder, and that doesn't mean we have to just use TextureRidges. We can use any of the Sapphire effects and combine them to create our own custom looks. So with Dust, I'll click on Load Preset, and I've got a few embers in here. I've got rising embers. And these look like particles. They're not actually particles. They're actually just tiny little dots, but they move like particles. And they actually have a little bit, as you can see, they have a bit more sort of randomness and turbulence that make them look a bit more like embers, a bit more realistic. So I'll click Load and just take a look at that. And in order to get them to rise faster, I have to increase the drift speed. So I'm just going to drag that up. Not sure how fast they need to be, but they've got to be pretty fast. Oh, that looks better. Okay, maybe even a little faster. And we need less of them. So we can decrease the number of points. And this is another example, a good example of, having lots of parameters that we wouldn't want to see in the host. While I'm working, I might just turn them all off and just, as I'm working, just work out which are the ones I want to see in the host. And if there's something that I, feel that would be really useful in the host as I'm working, I'll just turn that on. Okay, so, not looking too bad. You saw before how we could stretch the TextureRidges to make it look like it was motion blurred. But Dust, we don't have that option. So let's take a look at how you might want to add a bit of blur to this to sort of fake motion blur. So what we can do is we can disconnect it like this, select TextureRidges, hit the Tab key, type in Layer to choose Sapphire Layer, and that's putting the ridges in the foreground, but we're going to put them into the background just by dragging and connecting that. Like that, just move this across, put Dust here, and then just add that into the foreground, like that. So now you've got the dust sitting on top of the fire. But because Dust is not in the same hierarchy as the ridges, what we could do, I'm just going to turn off Show Checkerboard. What we could do is we could blur that using something like directional blur, BlurDirectional, right? So we could just change that like that. And let's see, increase the brightness, bring that up, give them more of a hot ember look, and something like that, right? We can give them a little bit of, see, that looks a lot more like embers. And I'm just going to select, I'm going to get rid of my mask and background. We don't need those. For now, I'm just going to hit Control or Command L and just going to bring that back in here because he was misbehaving a bit just to clean that up. So if we click on the result, you see I've got previous selected nodes selected, and if I select any one of these, it will preview up to that point. If I turn that off, it'll preview the whole thing. And take a look at that. And something like that. Pretty nice, huh? And let's just go to town with this, and after layer, we'll add a little bit of UltraGlow. So with UltraGlow, you can see that gives a nice hot glow around those. I'm going to leave it all on the defaults. And there we go. So I could keep tweaking this. I could add more effects and create a really complex custom effect that didn't appear to be complex in the host because we've only turned on the parameters that we want to use in the host. And speaking of host parameters, as a final step for this particular setup, what I'd probably do is just, first of all, just delete that TextureRidges. Just come through and just make sure I've selected all of my nodes and checked or unchecked the parameters. And this is the BlurDirectional, so maybe I just want to add blur amount. For S layer, I don't really need anything for that, so I can just turn that off. And for UltraGlow, maybe, brightness and threshold, something like that. And as one extra layer of usability inside the host, we can also rename the nodes. So if I just turn on previous selected, we can tell exactly what that is. That's the fire, flames. I'll call that flames. And this one is the smoke. Name that smoke. And the dust is the embers, right? Embers. BlurDirectional can be I guess we could call it motion blur. It doesn't really matter in this case. Don't need anything for layer 1, and UltraGlow we just leave as glow. And once again, we come up and we would save that as an S effect preset. But in this case, I'm just going to click OK, come back to the host. And here inside of DaVinci Resolve, you can see here's my settings. Just the ones that we turned on inside of the builder, making this super easy to use. So you can see how much more flexible it is, especially when you're using a nonlinear editor to work in Sapphire Effect Builder. I'll save this as a preset and then have that available, on my workstation or to share with other designers, other artists, other editors. All right, so that gives you an idea of how you can use Sapphire TextureRidges as an individual effect or combined with other Sapphire effects inside the Sapphire Effect Builder. To learn more about Sapphire, visit borisfx.com. You can also download a free trial. For now, this is John. See you in the next tutorial.